Disclaimer: the following program is designed to offend, provoke, and challenge your religious sensibilities. It contains content that will likely offend anyone who holds religion sacred. This is for those with thick skin or a taste for the harsh truth. If you're easily offended or cherish your religious views, please turn off now. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You have been warned.
All right, we're going to skip around a little today because I'm tired of full on Genesis and I need some diversity. Let's destroy one of the dumbest fairy tales in modern religion. The idea that Satan is God's enemy. He's not. In the Bible, the actual Bible, Satan is God's employee, not a rebel or a rival, just a glorified tattletale with clearance and zero spine. He shows up to the same meetings, follows orders, and carries out hit jobs like any other disposable tool in the system. The being giving out assignments to Satan would be Yahweh, the all-knowing control freak who can't seem to ruin someone's life without outsourcing it. In the book of Job, Satan doesn't break in. He walks in and God hands him a target. He says, have you seen Job? This isn't a war, it's a setup. Anne Rice figured that out in Memnoch, the devil. David tells Lestat that Satan isn't the villain. He's the one doing God's dirty work. And years later, Rice ditched Christianity altogether, publicly. That novel is still more honest about the Bible than half the pulpits on this planet. Here's how the story actually goes. I'm going to put it on the screens so you can see it for yourself. Nothing is made up here. Nothing is added or taken away. This is what it says. In Job 1:6, the sons of God come in to station themselves by Jehovah, and there doth come also the adversary in their midst. So he doesn't sneak in. He's not crashing the meeting. He's invited. He belongs there. And God doesn't say, get out of here. He doesn't say, you don't belong here. He says, whence comest thou? It's a routine check-in, like a staff meeting. Satan answers and he says, from going to and fro in the land and from walking up and down on it. That's it. No threats, no rebellion. He's just giving a mileage report. This is where I've been. That's what I've been doing. Then in verse 8, God, not Satan, brings up Job. He says, hast thou set thy heart against my servant Job? Which means Satan has been eyeing him, sure. But up until this point, Satan has not laid a finger on him. He's just been watching. And God calls it out and brags. He says, there is none like him, a man perfect and upright, fearing God and turning aside from evil. Now Satan fires back in verse 9. He says, for naught is Job fearing God. In other words, come on, he's only loyal because you've rigged the game. It says, hast not thou made a hedge for him? Bless the work of his hands, his substance hath spread. He's saying, of course he worships you. You pay him. Then in verse 11, Satan throws down the challenge. He says, put forth, I pray thee, thy hand, and strike against anything that he hath. If not, to thy face he doth bless thee. So he's saying, take away the bribes and watch him curse you to your face. And what does God say in verse 12? He says, lo, all that he hath is in thy hand. So God is giving full ability to Satan to wreak havoc. It says, only unto him put not forth thy hand. That's clearance. That's official permission. The adversary goeth out from the presence of Jehovah, and then the massacre begins. Servants get slaughtered, livestock gets burned, property gets stolen, and finally, a wind collapses the house where all 10 of Job's kids are partying, and they are dead. All of it approved, all of it authorized by Yahweh. And how does Job respond? It says, Jehovah hath given and Jehovah hath taken. Let the name of Jehovah be blessed. That's right. Job doesn't say the devil did this. He says God did this. Because according to the actual story, that's exactly what happened. And the only reason Satan can even act at all is because God gave him permission. Let's fast forward a little bit and pause on one line, just one. Job 2, verse 3. This is what it says. It says, thou dost move me against him to swallow him up without cause. This is after Satan already obliterated Job's life. Kids are dead, livestock stolen, fire from heaven, and a tornado straight out of a Final Destination movie. And now God says, you moved me. Read that again. God says, you, as in Satan, moved me. The Hebrew word here is suit, which I think is how it's pronounced. It means instigation, enticing, or provoking. God is blaming Satan for influencing him. So what happened to omnipotence? What happened to I change not? What happened to my will shall be done? According to this verse, Satan can influence God. God didn't just allow Job's destruction. He says, Someone talked him into it, which means God either didn't want to hurt Job and did it anyway, or did want to hurt him and is now pretending it wasn't his idea. So either he can be manipulated or he's a liar. And don't try the "it was just a test" excuse, because God himself says there was no cause for this. Not discipline, not judgment, just raw destruction because Satan said, Betty breaks. Now, shift to Zechariah chapter 3, where Satan still has a seat at God's table. Only this time, he's accusing, not attacking. Zechariah 3:1, Joshua the high priest stands before the angel of Yahweh, and Satan stands at the right hand like he belongs. He's accusing Joshua, not tempting or corrupting, but fulfilling a legal role. That fits the Hebrew. The Satan literally means the accuser. In verse 2 here, Yahweh says, Yahweh rebuke you, O Satan. So, he's talking to Satan, not punishment. He's not ejecting him out of the room. It's more like a formal override, saying, not today. In verse 3:3, Joshua stands in filthy garments, ceremonial impurity that bars you from worship. Satan saying, Israel is nationally defiled. But God orders in verse 4, take off his filthy clothes. I have removed your iniquity, and I will clothe you with festal garments. It's Levitical purification, Day of Atonement ritual language, divine forgiveness, not denial. So Satan isn't storming heaven, he's doing paperwork. And God removes the stains and restores. That's not a battle, it's the administrative protocol of atonement. Still think Satan's running around doing evil while God's just there sighing in frustration? Then explain this. Because the Bible flips the villain mid story. Same event, same sin, same punishment, different name. David orders a military census of Israel, something he wasn't supposed to do, and 70,000 people die for it. In First Chronicles 21:1, it says, And there standeth up an adversary against Israel, and persuadeth David to number Israel. That's Satan. No metaphor, no wiggle room. The Hebrew word says Satan, adversary. Now, look at 2 Samuel 24:1, the earlier version. It says, And the anger of Jehovah addeth to burn against Israel, and he moveth David about him, saying, Go number Israel and Judah. That's God, no Satan anywhere. And here's the slimy part. In the Young's literal translation, they try to soften it by sneaking in a lie. They add in brackets, and an adversary moveth David. The brackets, that's not in the Hebrew. It was added later to clean up the mess. If you don't believe me, just look at the actual Hebrew of 2 Samuel 24:1. I've put it on the screen for you. There is no adversary, no Satan. It's God. Full stop. And this isn't just a translation quirk. Chronicles came later. The writers didn't like what Samuel had to say, so they swapped the villain. God instigates a sin in one version, Satan in the other, and they hoped you'd never put them side by side. This isn't a divine mystery, it's an editorial spin. They wanted a holier God and needed a fall guy, so they kept the genocide but changed who pulled the trigger. That's not theology. And if your pastor isn't putting both of these verses up on the screen at the same time, now you know why. In this book, the villain isn't consistent. He's whoever the editor wants him to be. Here's another lie modern Christianity sells. Satan does not roll hell. Not now, not ever. Not in the Bible. Old Testament Job 1 verse 6, he's in heaven. Zechariah 3:1, still in heaven. No hell. New Testament, Revelation 20 verse 10, cast him into the lake of fire only after the judgment. Revelation 12:9, he's cast down to earth, not hell. And Luke 10:18, Jesus watches him fall from heaven like lightning. The horned overlord in a lava throne room, that's Dante, Milton, and bad cartoons. Biblical Satan isn't running or ruling anything. He's an inmate waiting for his cell. For anybody not familiar with the story, here's what actually happens, because you're not going to get this in Sunday school. We're in 1 Kings 22, and the only one with a functioning brain cell here is Micaiah in verse 8. Ahab, king of Israel and poster boy for delusion, wants to go to war, so he rounds up 400 prophets who all say the exact same thing. March to Ramoth Gilead, you'll totally win. Now next, here comes the good king, Jehoshaphat, the righteous one. the man who walked in the ways of David. And even he's not buying it. He hears 400 men shouting in unison about guaranteed victory and immediately goes, you got anyone who actually hears from Jehovah? That's verse 7. Meaning even the so-called godly king smells the bullshit. He's not skeptical of Ahab, he's skeptical of the message, the prophecy supposedly coming from God. And Ahab goes, yeah, but I hate that guy. He never tells me anything good. They're talking about Micaiah. So they drag in Micaiah anyway. In verse 15, he starts off mocking the other prophets by parroting their fake optimism right back at Ahab. Ahab immediately calls him out in verse 16 and says, enough sarcasm, tell me the truth. And Micaiah finally delivers. In verse 19, Micaiah says he saw Jehovah sitting on his throne with all the hosts of heaven standing around him. In verse 20, God asks the council, who will persuade Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? Not protect, not warn, persuade to fall. Spirits start pitching plans. Then in verse 21, one steps forward and says, I'll do it. I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And Jehovah responds in verse 22 and says, you'll succeed. Go do it. And just to be sure no one missed it, verse 23 says it flat out. Jehovah himself hath put a spirit of falsehood in the mouth of all these thy prophet. This wasn't Satan. This wasn't a rogue demon. This was God coordinating an assassination job using spiritual disinformation. So what does Ahab do after hearing all that? He has Micaiah thrown in prison in verses 26 and 27 and marches off to battle anyway. And surprise, he dies. Not in glorious combat, not in a heroic blaze, but by a stray arrow that just so happens to slip between the armor joints in verse 34. And in the end, dogs lick his blood off the chariot floor in verse 38, just like Elijah prophesied in 1 Kings 21. So let's review. 400 prophets lied, one told the truth and got punished, and God himself greenlit the entire setup from a throne room in heaven. Even the godly king didn't trust the message, and somehow we're still pretending Satan's a liar in this story. Before anyone jumps into the comments crying, those are just a few weird verses. Every appearance of Satan in Scripture isn't rebellion, it's a scheduled assignment. In Job, he walks into heaven, chats with God, gets permission, and works under limits. In Zechariah, he handles legal paperwork. In First Chronicles, he takes over God's old role. In the Gospels, he tempts Jesus only after the Spirit delivers him into the wilderness. In Luke 22, he enters Judas to fulfill prophecy. In Revelation, he's thrown to earth to drive the end game. He's not starting wars, he's delivering mail. If you still think Satan's the enemy, you're not reading the text. And the story of Ahab, Satan isn't even needed. God holds a strategy meeting, picks the best deception plan, and says, go lie. That's not passive permission, it's pre approved deception. The so called father of truth looked a spirit in the eye and said, lie to him, you'll succeed. Stop pretending Satan is the enemy. He's a subcontractor. Evil's just another job he clocks in for. The real boss is God himself. The next time you hear the devil is testing me, ask yourself, was it scheduled? If this shattered your Sunday school illusion, hit like. If it confirmed the voice in the back of your mind you've ignored, subscribe. And if you're still defending this God, you're siding with the boss who hires liars. Don't be surprised. He's been outsourcing evil since Genesis.